Hi, my name's Elizabeth Rimmer and I'm founder for EntrepreNurse. Today's Facebook Live, we are talking about, is burnout a given? So it's a topic that I wanted to talk about. Why? Because there's loads out there, isn't there, about this subject, and I kind of feel like it's something that I experienced a little bit myself, possibly without even sort of really seeing it at the time. And I think it's something that pretty much most nurses are likely to experience to a degree. You know, it kind of depends what you mean by burnout, doesn't it? And also I think, like, not being dramatic, I think it happens to a lot of people in life. So, you know, it's not something that's exclusive to people in the health sector. And I think it's just, you know, almost a case of life gets a bit tedious, doesn't it, at a certain point. You know, I think, you know, a lot of people are in their 20s, you kind of go through that super enthusiastic phase where you're full of life's dreams and ambitions, and you're going to change the world. And people quite often, I think, sort of move from job to job quite quickly. And then quite often people will at some point settle into a post which will become their thing, their job, and often that's where they'll stay, and they become expert at it, which is its own kind of fulfilling experience. Getting really, really good at something is pretty satisfying, and also it allows the fact that life is going on in the background. So whether, you know, people are having children, or they're getting married, or they're you know, moving to a new property, or that kind of thing. So that kind of point in life allows you to be able to manage lots of other stuff, because you're at that sort of expert point in life where you can kind of do everything almost blindfolded to a point. But then I think that can turn into something else where you start to sort of get a bit like, oh God, what next kind of thing. And like I said, I don't think it's exclusive to nursing by any stretch. But I think it does happen in nursing. And it's what I like to refer to as a twitch point. And so I think it's kind of, like I say, that point where everything's kind of all right and you're doing fine and it's okay, but you've kind of been through that sort of crescendo bit in life where it's all really exciting and you're full of, like I say, kind of joie de vivre, and you're kind of reaching a bit of a plateau. It's a bit like the film The 7-Year Itch, I suppose, but it's the twitch, not the itch. And the analogy that I like to use for this is this little guy, a meerkat. So I think that what happens is that nurses will suddenly sort of start to look up, look around, see what's going on outside their kind of world that they've created, and sort of wondering, is there something else going on out there that they could get involved in, or, you know, it's literally almost like that, just like a little sort of look around, hey, what's going on? And I feel this because I think I've said to you before, I've certainly said it on my podcast if you've listened to any of those, that, you know, I've had lots of nurses that have approached me over the years, kind of asking about aesthetics. How do I get into aesthetics? How do I become successful at aesthetics? And I think it is that little twitch point where they're suddenly putting their head up and thinking, what else is going on out there? And for me, I feel like I was almost pushed into making a dramatic change because I'd, as I say, gone through this sort of period where you become like expert at what you do, and in my general practice life, and then I had this brief stint as in a partnership in the practice that I was, which turned out to be a really horrible experience. And that, as a result of that, I kind of felt like I needed to do something completely different, because I didn't know where to go from there. I didn't really want to stay in my capacity working at the same practice, and yet I didn't want to go anywhere else. So I was kind of pushed into this. So I think for what happens for a lot of other people is that they pop their head up, they have a look around. Generally what they see is nurses in aesthetics. They might ask a few questions. Could I do that? Can I be successful at that? How do you get into that? And then quite often they'll just pop their head back down and crack on with what they're doing. And I've thought about this a lot, and I've thought that the reason that nurses particularly lean towards aesthetics is because when they look around, when they do the little meerkat moment, they see that there are nurses out there that are doing aesthetics. Because for me, it's like, not every nurse can be interested in aesthetics. It just doesn't make any sense. Obviously, nurses are good at aesthetics because it's generally injectables, and nurses are very familiar with injecting, so learning to inject the face is kind of a natural progression. But it can't be that every nurse is interested in aesthetics. It just doesn't make sense. So I think, let's say, the twitch point, you look around, and what's the most visible thing that nurses are doing outside of general conventional nursing is aesthetics. And so that makes sense. That's, to me, why people lean to that, and they think, yeah, that's what I can do as well. I can see other nurses doing that. I can see other nurses being successful at that. So I'm going to do that. So it's got me to thinking, and I've spent a lot of time kind of looking on Google looking into what other businesses do nurses get into. And what I found, probably quite unsurprisingly, is that the USA is really kind of a hub for this. And there are nurses out there just doing a whole massive plethora of different businesses and doing really, really well. And I'm not comparing us to America. I know that we're very, very different. I say we look the same, we talk the same, but we are very different beings. And certainly in terms of healthcare, obviously the whole healthcare scenario is completely different there to what we're used to working with the NHS. So I think because of that, it makes nurses probably a lot more financially aware and oriented. Because I can remember when I worked as a agency nurse on a private ward long time ago, but I can remember doing bank shifts there, and the first couple of shifts being really kind of freaked out that every tiny little thing you did for that patient, or every plaster, every giving set you used had a little barcode that you would remove and attach to that patient's records, because obviously they were paying for everything. Well, I'd never experienced anything like it, so that was quite wow, okay, this is how it works, is it? So I think probably the fact that that kind of thing happens in private care probably just does make you a bit more financially aware. So I'm not saying that we're the same, but I do think that nurses worldwide must share a kind of basic philosophy of wanting to kind of do good, wanting to care, wanting to help, wanting to nurture. There's got to be kind of similarities in our psyche, whether we're American, British, Filipino, French, whatever. And all I'm saying is that they are doing some amazing stuff. They are running successful businesses across the board. And likewise, there are nurses here doing the same thing, but they're smaller numbers and less visible, I would say. And, you know, for me, myself, it's like, if someone had told me in my 20s that I would have a successful business by now, it just wouldn't have rung true at all. I didn't have the desire for it. I didn't have the intention for it. And I certainly didn't think I had the capability for it. My career's kind of progressed, just sort of happened like it does for most people. But it has made me realise that if I can do this, then what can any nurse do? What can the nursing community do? Probably loads. So, like, you might be thinking, well, what's that got to do with burnout? You know, burnout is, again, you know, it's a bit of a vague term, isn't it? I think of it as being kind of physically and emotionally tired. There's going to be lots of extremes. You can have sort of mild burnout. You can have really severe, you know, where you're ending up going off sick and you know, perhaps needing GP support, all kinds. You know, burnout is all things to all people. For me, I kind of think that in terms of nursing and that period in general practice towards the end, I think I became a little bit less sympathetic, a little bit less tolerant. I think I was moving away from the nurse that I wanted to be and had always been. You know, I worked in Tower Hamlets. It was hard graft every day, relentless. You know, 12-minute appointments for patients, get them in, get them out, dealing with patients that, you know, don't have English as a first language, have social problems, have employment problems, have multiple health problems. I mean, you know the kind of scenario that I'm talking about, and yet there was a feeling of it. You know, I was there a long time, but it does start to feel kind of relentless. And, you know, within the sort of confines of the practice, yeah, you're valued, and, you know, I did feel valued and loved on a sort of an emotional level. But I think by the end, again, I did start to become more irritated by the lack of financial rewarding, I suppose. General practice is slightly different. You know, it is run like a small business, so it's not like working in a hospital. But, you know, it's, yeah, you're kind of working in an environment where there seems to be one rule for some people and another for others. So, yeah, you know, I think, and again, I think it's like, the harder you work, the more work that's laid on you. Like the more you're able to get on with stuff, the more you're expected to do. That's just kind of the way it is, isn't it? So, so for me, that's kind of burnout, is almost starting to just sort of lose sense of the fulfillment that things used to bring you. So there's this RCN document which I can't really show you because it's too hard to read. I can send it to you if you're interested. But this is just in a kind of study on employment, basically. I think it's 2017. And the executive summary is just around kind of their findings. So, you know, I don't know if you can see that there, but to summarise, nursing staff feeling overworked, underpaid, unable to provide the level of care that they would like, driving overall dissatisfaction with their role. You've got growing work pressures closely associated with short staffing and compromised patient care. Can I get on to the next page? You've got nurses feeling financially not very well off, especially the lower paid nurses. High levels of sickness absence, bullying, harassment, that kind of thing, poor morale, and developmental opportunities, meaning that increasing numbers of nurses are questioning their career in nursing.